So before we move on, I want to talk a little bit about modeling polymorphic systems. Sounds a bit odd, but once you get used to it, it's actually very commonsensical. So don't be put off by the funny words I'm using, but it's just something we have to do so we can develop the model further. And I've described previously what polymorphic systems are. But you know, basically the human species is the only one I'm aware of. As each element has consciousness and decides that it wants to be part of the whole, and that allows the whole to take on any organizational form, from great variety of things like a production line to a five-a-side team to a family. You know, same units can create these different forms, and so on. And there's lots of, but one of the things. So how do you model that? Well, I found a little easy way to model it is to talk about, instead of talking about specific systems, to talk about the system-element relationship. You know, so every system has elements. So a family has family members, community has community members, a neighborhood has people who live in the houses in the neighborhoods. You know, a corporation has departments maybe, or you know, a country has the elements of cities and villages in it, you know. So and the world has elements of nations, and we can just lots of different ways, of endless ways of looking at the different system element relationships that exist in our consciousness and that we adjust to and perform it in. But it allows us to go to a level of abstraction to say that every single one of these different specific instances we talk about is a system and a relationship to the elements within that system. So I just refer to the system-element relationship. Is a great way to model all of these polymorphic human systems quite easily. I'll go into that a bit more when we get to defining the primary disorder a bit more technically. But there's one interesting aspect of polymorphic systems, and there's only one that I'm aware of. That's the human species, you know. It's about health, and it's a principle of something that has to happen so that the system can stay healthy. And that is, for example, if you would think that if one part of the system is unhealthy, is need deprived, or is self-destructive in some way, that shouldn't necessarily impact the rest of the system. You know, let's just let that part of the system rot or fall away or self-destroy or be in trouble. You know, whether that's one particular part of a country, or one nation, or one member of a community, or whatever. But polymorphic systems don't work that way because each element is fully conscious of the whole system. And therefore, it's able to dynamically embrace its role, and it's what it does within that system. And it also has a degree of autonomy within that system. You know, it's not one centralized force, because then it wouldn't. It's not how it's built. It's so dynamic in this. I suppose maybe that would be one kind of polymorphic system, that is a centralized force for it, but that's not the kind that we are. It's sort of interesting. It's a collaboration of these unique consciousness to create interesting forms. Through figuring it out together. But the point is, because of that, if one element is deprived or sick or unwell or struggling, all the other elements are in a state of kind of stress or a state of shock, because they're thinking, that could be me. Because every element has an instinct to be a part of the system and to create well-being in the system. And it also has an instinct to take care of itself. And they're both, when it's working well, both of those instincts are collaborative, because if the elements aren't well, the system can't be well. And if the system isn't well, the elements can't be well. So this is a very mutually supportive, keeping these two things in line. But there is certainly an instinct within each element to take care of itself. But that's gone completely bonkers because we're in this period of illness now. So if one element is unwell, it puts all the others in a state of stress, because they think, oh, that could be me. I could be the next one to go. So it stops being able to be a part of the system in the way that it might otherwise be. It just impacts it, and it gets kind of very concerned with its own survival and its own state, rather than being concerned with the state of the system, which is essentially the primary disorder. So for the polymorphic system to work successfully, it's got to take care of all of its elements. It's got to say, if one element is struggling, we're all going to work together to make sure that that's okay. And then it can stay, everybody can focus adequately on their own survival elements and their own, making sure the whole system as a whole is working together. And that keeps that cohesion there. So I said that cohesion breaks down when some elements of it are permitted to fall apart. Now that's how it operates post-Neolithic Revolution. Pre-Neolithic Revolution, that effect operated somewhat differently because the force causing the illness on the system and the elements was an external thing, and the system would do its best to stay together within that. Obviously everything was different back then, but in the current state, it's important to understand this, creating health in polymorphic systems, the kind of polymorphic system that we are, which is truly amazing. And that's just an important dynamic to be aware of. And we kind of touched on modeling there. So the next section I'm going to go into a bit more technically in how to model it. But you don't have to worry too much about it. I mean, it's interesting, it's helpful, but how I've described it so far is fine as well. But I do find it interesting to take a more modeling approach, which kind of is cool. But if you're not into this kind of system element, all these fancy names and strange things I talk about, don't worry about it, because basically you understand the model anyway. I've already described it, so it's not a problem. And I'll describe it in other ways. I'm going to break it down into another approach of 12 premises to explain the same model, so you can look at it from different perspectives to get understandings of it. And we're going to look into some more subtleties of the secondary disorders. We're going to talk about those a bit more too. And as I said, it's really quite endless. Once you get the completed model, you understand the whole thing. Investigating it, discovering it, it's an endless, wonderful kind of exploration of it that we can all engage in together and talk about and figure out, bit by bit. And different people have different ideas and kind of developing it further. And hopefully then towards the end of the lessons, we'll just focus on resolving the primary disorder and the secondary disorder in the human species, and some ideas for that. I've already shared one, proposed the standard enlightened diet, which I think if we all just embrace it, allows for enough diversity so that we don't all have to agree on the same things about diet, but those fundamental principles and how to get there would just solve a whole lot of problems. That's an example of trying to find solutions, but also acknowledging that we're in a situation now where starting out the primary disorder is not, it's either that or extinction, and actually that's a natural state for our species, because creating our well-being and functioning optimally to survive was how we operated under the constant threat of extinction. Even perhaps not consciously, but it was there, and we responded to it. Because we did perceive it in whatever way we perceived it back then. So it's not that we're not able to rise to this challenge, or we don't have the capacity. We just need to maybe develop a bit more insight into the primary disorder and organizational disease and how to deal with that, and interesting other topics that we're going to discuss in future lessons.